My next guest knows that feeling. Shani Silver is the author of A Single Revolution and host of A Single Serving podcast, and says those moments drove her to a dark place that left her feeling like she'd failed. That is, until she made it her mission, in fact, to write and speak about it full time, sharing her journey with the world.
In the world that I grew up in, it has always seemed like you expire at 30. So if you're not married by the stroke of midnight on your 30th birthday, you have failed. There's a lot of failure messaging that's delivered to single women. If you haven't found someone yet, you're undesirable. If you haven't found someone yet, you're unlovable. If you've ever gone to dinner with a bunch of couples and waited to sit down until all the couples had picked their seats so that you were last, and you just fit in wherever you fit in, that's one of those things. I needed to start thinking about singlehood very differently. So the first thing I had to do in order to feel better about my singlehood was to stop seeing it as a problem and to start locating its value. Not only are we enough, we are just as much as everyone else who is in a couple. And the more you can find ways to show yourself that that's true, the more that message will sink in and the better I think single women can start to feel.
Please welcome Shani Silver to the TAM Fam. I am so excited to talk to you. Congratulations on all the success and really striking this nerve, this conversation that we need to continue to have, especially when people look at resetting at the new year. There's this story, Shani, that you've shared. You were assigned a bunk bed on a girls' trip. What happened there?
So I was on a trip with several friends, some of whom were in couples, and I wasn't. And as many people do when we rent Airbnbs, everybody sort of gets assigned a room. And the natural assumption was that because I was a single person, I was going to be the one to take the bunk bed room. They were child's beds, these really small sleeping situations. And that was just sort of understood to be where I was going to sleep. And that was really one of the first times that I started to think in my head, why do we treat single people as lower in value than those in couples? And once I started to challenge that idea, the seeds of the career that I have now were planted because I wanted to do more to sort of awaken that thought process in others as well.
Well, I didn't get married until I was in my late 40s, and I know exactly what you're talking about, that devaluing of single people, particularly single women, and this notion that if you are single, you are selfish, that you don't care about anything, and that you're not enough. You're not adult enough, in fact. People measure your adulthood by whether or not you have kids, which I saw each and every time someone would ask me when I was finally having a kid, even though I was in my 40s, independent and doing my own thing.
Exactly. There is that notion that you haven't quite graduated into adulthood yet if you haven't yet found a partner. But that's actually not true at all. We were just as valid, just as whole, and just as enough prior to partnership as we are afterward.
I mean, and what you said, and with all due respect, it's not that this is a novel message, but for some reason it doesn't stick. We're not reinventing the wheel by telling people that you're enough if you're single and 35, 45, 55, but we keep having to say it over and over. Why do you believe that's the case?
I think it's a narrative that has been socialized into us and groomed into us since we were children. Every movie we watched, every book we read, every song that we heard on the radio was reinforcing the subtle, casual message that the correct way to be is in a couple and the incorrect way to be is single. And when that's what you grow up with, it can get very difficult to rewrite that narrative for yourself and reframe that narrative for yourself because you're challenging something you've just sort of accepted your whole life. So it can be difficult, and it definitely can take practice, but it's worth it because after you do that, after you reframe singlehood for yourself and sort of wake up to its benefits, not just what we assume it lacks, you can start to feel just so much better.
You know, we heard from some members of the TAM Fam who were sharing that they feel that they are enough no matter what others think. But one of the members of our TAM Fam community, Marianne, admitted to still struggling with feeling that she is enough because she's single. Here's what she told us.
I've been in a 35-year relationship. Sadly, it's ending, and I don't know how to be alone. How do I learn to love being single?
What is your advice for people who are experiencing that, especially at the beginning of this year?
I I think the first step is a change in perspective. Again, it's that narrative that we've been taught that singlehood is inherently bad and wrong, but we're allowed to challenge that for ourselves. We're allowed to see things from a different perspective. And the perspective I would encourage here is to give some time and some attention to not what singlehood lacks, a partner, but what is singlehood full of? Because in my mind, singlehood is full of things like freedom. It's full of the ability to customize your entire life, your entire space, everything you do to your preferences and your preferences only. And there's an absence of compromise within singlehood that's actually kind of fun, and sort of figuring out what those positives are. It's such a gift that you give yourself, seeing singlehood from a different perspective.
Well, and at the end of the day, none of us are the box that we check when someone asks us our status in a relationship, whether that answer is married, divorced, or single. It doesn't define us, and the singlehood should not define the total journey, which is what you talk about in such an outstanding and refreshing way. Shani, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, be sure to check out A Single Serving podcast and Shani's book, A Single Revolution.